Well, I'm so honored to be sharing this series with you this month. Thank you so much to Papa Kilo, who took off and entrusted us with his house. When he comes back, please tell him we did not do anything that was untoward. The house is secure. He's out in Uganda for a conference, and he asked me to co-teach with him this exciting new series that we're talking about this month called The White Flag. I pray that as we hear God's instruction to us this month from this series, that it will change our lives in a dramatic way and accelerate us to a new level. You know, by the way, it's September. It's the 9th month of the year, right? Have you guys been praying and trusting God for big things? Have you? What happens in the 9th month of a pregnancy? A delivery is due, eh? Those things you have prayed for, may the Lord deliver them for you this month. May this be a month of breakthrough for you and of acceleration. And may it start even as we go through this series and as we learn about surrender. Now, the whole idea of surrender is actually part of the release of a new book by Pastor Murithi Wanjao, our own Pastor M, called The Genius of Surrender. The book is actually available. And so it's not just Usifiwe, but we are also launching this book. It's available for you, should you wish to pick a copy at the info desk, right outside after the service. In addition to that, you can get a physical copy for yourself through our website. And we also have an ebook for those of you who prefer to read on Kindle. It's available on the Amazon Kindle. Now, preaching a sermon about surrender is always a difficult thing. And one of the things that's most difficult about it is that we love control. I am a melancholic person by nature, and I can assure you I love control so much that it is difficult for someone like me to hear a sermon about surrender. You see, surrender is something that we frown upon in our current culture. And the reason about it is that we love the independence that comes from being in control. We hate the rally experience and sitting behind in the co-driver seat and letting a 26-year-old take us around a spin because we prefer to control. Now, it's very interesting for me that even before that clip, there was a part where the president was going to get into the car and they was asking him, are the brakes good? This thing has been tested, right? You're sure this thing is whatever, you're legit. Because he wanted to know, before I give my control to you, you better have everything in order and everything having been checked and hopefully rechecked. And after that, been rechecked just one more time, just to make sure. No movie captures the spirit of our times as well as this movie, which I'm sure some of you who are graying or about to gray would remember. Any of you remember this movie? No Retreat, No Surrender? Yeah, in the earlier service I said that and it was just cricket. Thank you for making me feel a bit more comfortable. Hollywood is very enthralled with tales based on people who took control, people who did not give up, people who, despite facing such significant odds, continued and pursued a course that they believed in. People who took control. We just love those movies. How many of you remember King Leonidas and his 300? Yeah? Giving up no quarter, despite the fact that he was faced by significant opposition from King Xerxes, the Persian King Xerxes, at the Battle of Thermopylae. He overcame those significant... Okay, he didn't quite overcome them. The story doesn't end very well. But he took control, and he did not give up. We've adopted what I think is perhaps a quintessentially American way or outlook of life that says that nothing matters more than living life on your own terms. And for those who didn't remember No Retreat, No Surrender, perhaps you remember Frank Sinatra's famous song, I did it my way. You know, I faced it all, and I stood tall, and I did it my way. That's what it's all about, my way. We need to take control. Our motivational literature doesn't help. If you Google the best sellers list in 2023, this is interesting because you'll find titles that are all about winning, conquering, controlling outcomes. One of the most famous books, and it's amazing to me, this book was written in the 50s by Dale Carnegie. is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It is still, in 70 years later, in the top bestsellers list. Why? Because who doesn't want to win friends? Who doesn't want to influence people? One of the other books that makes that list is a book called Good to Great. Anyone who has read it? Jim Collins? You know the book, right? Because everyone is good. Good is so ordinary. Why don't we become great? And it's the same theme is carried through in the title of another bestseller by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. Anyone who's read that as well? Yeah, because who wants to be ordinary? Ordinary is so ordinary. We all have to be outliers, right? So our movies say it, our literature says it. We want to be in control because we love control. Surrendering control means giving the other the right to choose where you go, what you do. It means possibly giving up something, and something that is a non-negotiable for you. To most people, surrender has a negative connotation. It actually has been equated many times with words such as yield, submit, give in, give up, succumb, resign, lose. I like that. So any time anyone mentions the word surrender, it just has a bad connotation to it. You know, you could say, I'm resigning, I've given up, I quit. When do you resign? When you lose your job, right? And in these difficult economic times, is that a thing you want to do? No way. When it says succumb, what does it conjure up in terms of images in your mind? Michelle, what do you think about? Death. I gave up. Some disease hit me, right? And I succumbed. So you don't want that sort of surrender. When you say submit, you recognize that you're putting someone else in control of your life and giving them that decision. When you say give up, lose, it means you have lost all hope of ever accomplishing something that was important for you to do or something that you had planned to do. And if surrendering to someone is difficult, I can almost guarantee that the most difficult thing for you and for me is surrendering to God. Because with people, if Michelle asked me to do something, I just say, yeah, Michelle, yeah, you're my neighbor, but I really don't want to do that. But now God has asked you to do it. How do you say no to God? He's the creator of the world, he's everywhere. So at least I can avoid Michelle, but now if I go here, God is here. I go to the depth, I go to this, he's everywhere. How can I say no to him? And I think we fear surrendering our control to God. We fear that he may ask us to do something that we don't want to do. He may say, resign your job. And you love that job. You've worked for that career. You've trained, educated yourself and all that. And then he says, you've got to resign this. You're going into ministry. In fact, I'm sending you. Pastor M is sending you to plant Mavuno in... Give me a place. In? Sorry? Ati? Or in Dar es Salaam? Or in Garissa? Yeah. Yani Pastor M the Lord has spoken to him and he feels you've been called to ministry and you're planting in Garissa. Say amen to Mavuno, Garissa. Okay, I can see you guys are not very enthusiastic about that one, but Garissa needs to hear the gospel, right? He may ask you to go as a missionary to a difficult place. And I always read the books of history and of the missionaries who came to bring the faith here, and I just think, how difficult must it have been for you to get into a ship, to go to a place where nobody knew anything about? So if you Google, nothing came up. It was a dark continent after all. And you're going to that place, no resources, no contacts, no connections, no training could prepare you for the adversity of what Africa was. And when I think about that, I think, yeah, that's the sort of thing that God is going to perhaps ask me to do. Or he could also ask you to stay single. I don't know, you've been tracking the Bible up with us? Recently, Paul was talking about how he wishes that you are all single as you were, right? And you've been praying. You've gone to Catalonia. Do you guys know where Catalonia is? If you don't know, go. Because something happens when you go and pray in Catalonia. And so you've gone to Catalonia, you have prayed, you trusted God, you are going to bring me that tall, dark, handsome guy. Or there'll be this sophisticated, sweet, petite lady who'll come into your life. And then God calls you. He says, surrender to me. What if he says, don't marry? How do I deal with the disappointment of the things that I desire being taken away from me? It is not hard to see why a person in their right mind would not wish to give or surrender control of their lives to God. Surrender is something, even as believers, we don't speak enough about. When we preach, typically, if you've been to a crusade, if you've been to, let's say a crusade, we used to call them back in the day in school. I don't know if they still do, challenge weekends. Do you still have challenge weekends? Okay. Like crickets. Jemo, at least say you know those ones. You don't know. Kanyek is where are you? Please, someone desk me. Anyway. So we used to have these things called challenge weekends when preachers would come to school and they just preach the whole weekend and they'd be giving you a challenge. The purpose was to challenge you. And many times the challenge was to accept Christ as our Lord and Savior. And I think the way the gospel was sold that time is that it was almost a bit like spiritual fire insurance. Since Lucas has started confessing here, can I also confess? Me, when I came to the Lord as a student at the university, it was watching a play called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. It was fire, but serious fire. Hell's Flames. And I actually sat and thought to myself, if I got to that gate, do I have any assurance that I'll actually make it to heaven? I'll be sent to hell. And I thought, I'm not a really bad guy. I don't do really bad things, but just in case, let me buy myself some fire insurance. Let me get onto God's good side. I can become a church goer. I can do some good things, avoid bad language, avoid hanging out in the wrong sides of town, in the wrong sides of people. And then this salvation thing will work well, and I will be free from the vagaries of hell. I shouldn't have preached that way, because now you guys are thinking that this is the way that you should come. But the reality is, for many people, they believe that salvation is primarily to save you from hell. And surrender is reserved for those, those special spirit guys. You guys knew them. Did you go to school with them? Those guys who almost felt like they would walk, but the feet would not quite touch the ground because they were just so, you know what I mean? They were just so holy. They would just speak. And you just feel the flow of the Spirit. This guy is so anointed. He's been spending quality time with the Lord. So those are the guys who are supposed to surrender. Or would it be for people like Joan of Arc? You read the story of Joan of Arc? Okay. I need to actually update. Chico, please, help me update my examples. Because I'm talking about people who people don't know about. But Joan of Arc has to recount the faith. She had actually been a conquering hero in France. And was burnt at the stake, refused to recant her faith. And there have been many stories of martyrs. If I can come closer to home, in our very neighborhood here in Uganda, you probably have heard of the Namugongo Shrine and of those young men who refused to recant their faith and are immortalized up till today. So those are the guys who need to surrender. It shouldn't be us guys like us we are now. That is for the super spiritual Christians. But the reality is, this is not the Bible's view. The Bible's view is that surrender is for each and every one of us. You guys don't look like you heard me, so please turn to your neighbor and tell them, surrender is for each and every one of us. There are several things that are covered in Pastor M's book, and this week we'll be just taking a peek at one aspect that talks about surrender. And if you forget everything else in this service, the thing I'd love you to take with you today that you're exploring is that the major reason that Jesus came to earth was to achieve your surrender. So it wasn't a question, it was actually an exclamation. The major reason Jesus came to earth was to achieve your surrender. A few months back, we learned that the Bible's central message was that God, the ultimate king of the earth, the one who created heavens, who created the earth, the one who created you and me in his image, and who breathed his very breath upon us and in us, who blessed us and gave us a responsibility, created us to be here so that we could take dominion of the earth and to rule it on his behalf. That is why we are here, to rule the earth on behalf of God. If you don't believe me, look at Genesis 12:28, and you can read it with me. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." He placed man in a beautiful garden, a place of perfection, a place of exquisite beauty. He placed man in a place of perfection and only gave him one instruction. You know, in the middle of the garden, we always think that there was a single tree. But if you read the Bible, there really wasn't a single tree, was there? How many trees were there? There were? Oh, there were many trees. But in the middle, no, there were many in the whole garden. But in the middle of the garden, there were how many trees? 2 trees. Yeah. One tree they were told, this one do not eat of. But the other one they could eat of. What was the other tree called? The tree of life. You know that life that you long for? The way people say, tunaenda kula maisha. Tunaenda kula raha. That was a tree that was there. So just think about it. If you really wanted to kula maisha, what do you think of when you say kula maisha? Going to Watamu? Doing what? Having a long break. That tree, they could eat of every day, not once a year. That tree was in the place. That is what God intended us to do, to eat this tree, to enjoy of its fruit every day. But as is so common to us, the only thing we always remember is the prohibition. And we forget the blessing that God has given us. And because we could not obey his command with regard to the prohibition, we lost that tree. And we lost with it everything. We lost everything. The natural consequence of our rebellion, because that is what it was, our rebellion against God's way, against God's command, was that we were separated eternally from God, who is the source of life. And what happens when you're separated from life? You are dead. Allah. You are dead. And how did we die in our separation? So let's talk a bit about death. It's not a present topic, is it? But let's talk a bit about it. One of the ways in which we died is that we died physically. You see, we are created to be in God's very image, his very likeness, and to live forever, to eat from that tree of life that was in the middle of the garden. But after the rebellion, it all begins to fall apart. And listen to what God says to Adam after that, from Genesis 3:9. And this is towards the end. You will return to the ground, for out of it you are taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now, do you think God breathed his breath into humanity, molded him out of the dust of the earth, so that he would go back again? Do you think that was the way it was supposed to be? Because I think when God's breath entered the lives of people, something changed, and something should have changed forever. That even though you came from the ground, that you are not to look like the ground, because God had then put his breath into us. But then we rebelled. And since that time, we've suffered disability. We've suffered disease. We've suffered brokenness. We've suffered pain. We've suffered death. Despite the fact that we try to look after ourselves well. Si kama mimi nimejaribu. Thank you. Yani, M-Pesa haijafika. Despite the fact that you try to look after yourself in the best way possible, eat healthy, jog, keep physically fit, sleep well, the inevitability of this life is that it's all going to come to an end. August for me was a particularly difficult month, and I don't know whether it was for you as well, because there's been so much bereavement around, right? I had 7 funerals in August. 7. Close family, close friends who had lost a parent, one of my good friends who had lost his wife, and someone who we were in school with passed away. And this has become our reality. It may be even in the congregation today we have many who have been bereaved, who are going through a season of bereavement. May God visit you with his compassion. May the Lord just comfort you in this difficult time. Because what we experienced is just the pain that comes with the physical death that we suffer as a result of the rebellion. The second death we suffered was an emotional death. You see, created to be like God in God's own image, first the man and the woman were to experience a special relationship and a special closeness with God. But even over and above that, they were to experience a special relationship and a special closeness with each other. In Genesis 2:25, it says they were both naked and they felt no shame. But then just a few verses later, we see the first CBC lesson in the Bible. Because what do? And this is Genesis 3:7. They say their eyes were opened and they knew they were naked, so they went, sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves coverings. Why do you think they were covering themselves? Was it for God? It was for them, the two of them, right? Because they knew they were all of a sudden naked. And this time they were afraid. Not the way it was created to be. But then over and above, hiding from each other, because they hid from each other by covering themselves, they also hid from God. When God comes walking in the garden, ostensibly to come and bond with the man and the woman who he had spent so much time with and lived in so much proximity and closeness with, Adam said, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked and so I hid. And you know what? Till today we are hiding. I think we've built walls, we've built barriers where we can stay on this side and keep God on that side. That's why I think in Revelation 3:20 it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Could Jesus need to knock if we were tight? It means there's a door somewhere, right? There's a wall somewhere. And he needs to come in. And despite the fact that we rebelled against him, he's standing there. He's knocking. He's asking that you let him in, so that he would come in and dwell with you and you with him. We are still hiding from God today. This was not the way it was supposed to be. You should be walking with Jesus, walking with the Lord in the coolness of the day, enjoying fellowship with him. But we rebelled. I think the biggest manifestation of that emotional death for us has just been our mental health. I read something in the papers, I think it was this week or last week, if I'm not okay, we are in this week, so it must have been last week, that said that in our police force, we're just talking about their uniform, 4 out of 10 police officers have been found to have mental health issues. Isn't that scary? 4 out of 10. But I'm sure if you take even the wider population, it's also almost a similar statistic. Our mental state becomes so tenuous. Our emotional state becomes so frail. We get hooked and addicted to anything that will try to dull the pain of the emotional death that came as a result of the fall. This is not normal. This is not how it was supposed to be. I'm so sorry to depress you guys because you look so depressed. But I shall have to continue and tell you about, this is the Bible, it wasn't me, that you also suffered a third death, a relational death. If you look at the mess that is in our relationship today, we can track it back to the rebellion. And I think if you've done the Ndoa class, you hear us talking a lot about this. That what happened after the rebellion is that God came and he confronted the man and asked him, who told you you are naked? And what does Adam say in Genesis 3:12? The man said, the woman you gave me to be with me, she gave me from the tree and I ate. And in that one verse, we see the first bus in the Bible. And we see Eve right under the bus, thrown there courtesy of Adam. He asked, who told you are naked? And she starts saying, it is the woman who you put me here with. You know, like when you catch your child with sugar here, and you're asking them, who was it in this sugar? And they say, it's not me, but the sugar is all here. They threw someone else under the bus. And I tell them, no, the question was not who didn't eat the sugar. The question was who ate the sugar. He dodged the responsibility. And Eve was not to be outdone. Because when the Lord said to the woman, what is this that you have done? What did the woman say? The snake. It's a snake. It deceived me and I ate. And the snake was left with no leg to stand upon. Papa Kilo! That is his type of joke there. And so relational death enters the world. The blame, avoiding responsibility, wanting to look good at the expense of others has led us to betrayal, broken friendships, ugly competitiveness, loneliness, divorce, injustice, oppression. Any couple that is struggling with their marriage right now knows what this is like. And if you are not married, you came from a family. People walk around with a lot of sibling wounds. Kwanza kama ulikuwa uko last born ama uko katikati like me, and you had older brothers and sisters who worked on you, you know those sibling wounds, right? People have mother wounds. People have father wounds. Things that were said because relationally, something is broken. There is pain that has entered our existence. There is pain that has entered relationships that are supposed to be pleasuresome, that are supposed to be affirmative, that are supposed to give us significance because of the rebellion. And though we desire to be close, though we desire to be affirmed, though we desire to feel a deep sense of belonging, that does not happen because of the relational death. It doesn't get better because it's a forced death, an environmental death. After all these events, God says to Adam, because of the disobedience, Genesis 3:17-19, cursed is the ground because of you, or cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. 19, in the sweat of your face, right? You shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you are taken, and out of it you're taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now, yesterday I was sharing about this sermon with a friend of mine, and he shared a very profound thought that I wanted to share with you today. And I know if you've been talking through the Bible, we finished Romans just a few weeks ago. In Romans 8, there's a chapter where it talks about all creation groaning, in eager expectation, waiting for the sons of God, where sons means sons and daughters of God, to be revealed. That all creation groans. And you know, when I read that scripture, I always think it means it's us who are groaning, right? But all creation groans. And as Papa Kilo says, all in Kikamba means, all in the Greek means, it means everything. Even this creation that you see is groaning. Now, think of your favorite place. You know, one of those places where you just go and you just think, this is my happy place. If I'm there, even the stress levels just go down. I love to go to this place. What would those places be like? Na musiseme arboretum. Watamu, Shela. Any mountain climbers here who love to go up? I don't know whether it's up, Aberdares, Longonot. But it's a nice place. When you're up at the top, looking down at the crater, or even looking down around the whole of that Suswa area, right? You know what? That thing or that place that makes you so happy and so delightful, when you think, wow, this is nature, this is Eden, it's groaning. You know, in the garden, trees just sprang up from the ground. But what does it say in the verse that you just learned? That the ground now produces thorns and thistles. So even if you go to a Arboretum and you think, wow, these trees are so beautiful, this environment is so lovely, the things you're seeing are probably thorns and no, everyone always says, oh, if you find your happy place, go to that place, a place of well-being and all that. We actually seek our well-being in places of thorns and thistles. Eden was not Arboretum. Do you guys understand that? It wasn't Arboretum. It wasn't Longonot. It wasn't Aberdares. Eden was a place of exquisite beauty. So when you see all this degradation, when you see this overfishing, when you see the way in which you have treated and mistreated the environment, this is not a picture of how it was supposed to be. And it is not a picture of how it was supposed to be because of our rebellion. And thankfully, my last death is spiritual death. Unlike the animals that God created, the human beings were special in a way. Because I think he actually said, let the ground bring forth animals. Let the sea be teeming with life. Let there be birds in the sky. But for you, his own hand crafted you. You know, the Bible says you are God's workmanship. He crafted you with his hand. And beyond that, he breathed his very life in you. Woman, if you are here, you are taken out of the side of man. But God's amazing work of craft in you, sisters. And even the guy had to fall asleep. He needed this guy asleep. I don't know whether the guy might have had a few ideas about whatever that he didn't want to interfere. So women, God crafted you, made you, molded you in his image. And when the man stands up, he just says, whoa, man. Amazing. God created us in his very image, in his very likeness. And after all that, our rebellion brought us a separation from him. I think kicking man out of Eden was probably one of the toughest things God did. But it was also an act of mercy. Papa Kilo was talking about it here recently. Just saying, can you imagine man living forever in his fallen state if he reached out and ate from that tree of life as he was? So God banishes him, we see in Genesis 3:23, from the garden and sends him out to work on the ground from which he was taken. Even after being kicked out of the garden, it left a deep spiritual void in each of us. And whether we are believers, whether we are not believers, we all have an urge and a desire to worship. For believers, we worship the Lord. For those who are not believers, they'll always find worship in something else. You see, when you look at the Old Testament and you see all these many gods that were created back then, you think those gods ended with the New Testament, right? Right? Yeah, I've talked about death and back again. Just right. Right? But did they? I think they rebranded. So rebranding is in the Bible. It was actually there before we knew about it. Because you had Mammon. Mammon was a god of possession and a god of greed. What did he become? He just became money and material things and keeping up with the Joneses, the things we long for, right? There's a god called Baal, right? You remember Baal and his servants up on Mount Carmel with Elijah? You remember them? The 400 calling upon God, upon their God. to come and show himself with power. Because Baal was a god of rain. He was a god of wind. He was a god of war. But Baal has rebranded and he's become the god of power. The power we thirst for, fight for, in such a powerful way. You had a lot being said about Asherah poles, right? And about the god Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth was a god of fertility, was a god of sexual love. And there would be shrines created for her in every high place, under every spreading tree, where people would go to indulge and celebrate the love that Ashtoreth represented. And what has that become today? Just rebranded slightly. It has shown itself up in our obsession with sex, in our obsession with beauty, because Ashtoreth was the god of beauty. I think the Greek called her Venus. It has also shown up in our obsession with health. Two of the biggest industries growing right now are wellness, which has something to do with health and has a connotation about longevity and non-aging, and beauty. I saw an article, I think also, was it this week or the other week, saying that salons have gotten a new lease of life because people like Rianoi, people like JMO, people like Pastor Simon are now doing facial scrubs. They're now wrapping themselves up in eucalyptus. We are doing our pedicure, manicures, and we are doing our pedicures. Obsession with beauty. Guys who are in their early 50s like me have black hair. In fact, our politicians who are 70 here, their hair is blacker than mine. It's a big industry. We all don't want to look old. We don't want to age. We are obsessed with worship. And this is really an Ashtoreth worship, an Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth spirit. We all have a God-shaped void in each of us. We try as much as possible to avoid the fact that we live in a broken world with broken people and surrounded by a lot of death. So much so that an American anthropologist by the name Ernest Becker wrote a book called The Denial of Death. And in his book, the entire premise is that humans everywhere organize their lives and their cultures to ignore or avoid the inevitability of death. You hear that? A lot of what we do, a lot of how we organize our culture and our lives is to avoid the inevitability of death. Now, just thinking about it, having come from August with 7 bereavements, and I remember in one of them, someone was talking from Ecclesiastes, where they say, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. But who really wants to be in the house of mourning? Yeah? So we organize our lives around that. You don't want to be in that house of mourning. Where do you want to be? So you want to be in the place that has life. Yeah? And that is just one example of the many things that we actually do around our lives to just try to get away from the inevitability that death is around us. And you know what? It's so funny. It's so ironical that we are still looking for control, which is what created this whole mess. This death we are running away from was created by that desire for control in the first place. It's Albert Einstein who said, you cannot solve the problems using the same kind of thinking that created them in the first place. Our independent spirit cries out to us and tells us, I don't want to follow anyone. Oprah says, I will follow my own truth. And we all know that we have sent those posts with the hashtag positive vibes. We just want everything to be okay. But it's not going to help us. But I thank God that with God, there is always a provision for redemption. Jesus comes onto the scene, and in John 10:9 and 10, he makes this powerful challenge. He says, yes, I am the gate, or I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pastures. For the thief that time, and even today, doesn't come to do anything except to steal, to kill, and to destroy. His agenda has never changed. He dropped man in the garden, told him you can't trust God, deceived him, had him thrown out of the garden, and then he also rebrands and comes today in a new age and comes to tell you, take control. Let this be just about positive vibes. Do it your way. Spinning, retooling, rebranding, reorganizing that lie of his again to say you can't really trust God. Man, if there is one focused guy I come to know in the Bible, it's a devil. And Jesus says he has 3 agendas: to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But I thank God for that last verse. And let's read it together. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. That life, that tree, we're supposed to be eating from. This is why Jesus came. He wanted you to have life. And not just have a bit of life. It's an everyday life. To have it more abundantly, in its fullness. And what Jesus is saying to us is that when you're surrendered fully to Him, that's the only way that you can live. So it's not about saying, I'm going to go to church, tick. I'm going to show up for 4:30 prayers every Monday to Friday, tick. And just in case I forgot, I'm going to have my video on, tick. Maybe double tick. And I'm going to have my mic unmuted. And I'm going to tithe. I'll always give you his 10%. It may be a bit of a high commission, I think. But yeah, 10%, okay. If it's 10%, tick. It's a rule-based thing that we think helps us and then frees us up so that on this other side, let me live my life the way I want to. The 90% that I haven't tithed is still mine. My sex life is still mine. My career life is still mine. That is the devil's lie. Because he's still telling you, God just wants this part, but you can still keep this part. Is it really surrender or control? The thing I want to end with is saying that the only way to life in all its fullness, the only way to the best life that you could ever imagine is total surrender to God. You see, when Jesus came here, the one thing he spoke about with passion, with examples over and over again to break it down to us so that we could understand it in its fullness was about the kingdom. He came here to represent a king. And a king has dominion. And this king had dominion over this earth and gave that dominion to you. To you. To rule on his behalf. And he needed to take us back into the place where we were in alignment with this king and with this king's purpose. And the way we would fall in alignment with this king's purpose is by being surrendered. The reason the Jewish leaders killed him is because the lie of the enemy will still do this. Obey the commandments. Obey the laws. Do all the things that look right. It doesn't matter what you're doing on this side or how clean your life looks. And that dichotomy, I can obey God partially, but still do my own thing here. Jesus came and wanted to break it, bring it down into alignment, into full control. Today, each of us is faced by the same choice that they faced back then. Will you trust this king fully, completely, unconditionally? Or will you reject surrender and seek to live life on your own terms? My prayer is as we go deeper into this series, this month of birth, this month when the things that you've been longing for with expectation are going to be birthed, may they be birthed in a space where you recognize that surrender and the choice for surrender is what is going to help you live your best life yet. What you see around you, this is not how it was meant to be. Scripture tells us how it was meant to be. We rejected him. But by his grace, he sent his son to come and help us come back to alignment.